Guten Abend, Liebchens. This is Salem Suicide, actually Reichsmarshal Salem Suicide of the Army of Darkness. Hello to any other members who are out there watching. My new friend Statutory Rape invited me to participate in this collaborative excursion onto the dark side of drag, so hold on. Before I go any further, I'll ask you to watch this whole video. I've included some goodies at the end, tips to get started or being better at being a drag queen. I've learned these things through long and sometimes painful experience, and I've included them because this type of nuts and bolts hell is in short supply in the drag community. At least if you aspire to be a better performer instead of some life-size cartoon character. Performing related topics like hair, makeup, and comportment you can either learn from or by watching other queens. But these are the things that are often considered too trivial to be taught, yet useful beyond measure. So wait until the end. So Statia says that the Velvet Underworld is for those of us who do drag, but are definitely not part of the mainstream. That pretty well sums up my entire attitude towards drag. I'm a pretty rock-ribbed nonconformist anyway, and you certainly don't grow a career as a drag queen if you want to be like everybody else. I've been a fan of Calpurnia Adams for quite a while by the time my first show. And although I'd known about drag queens before I became interested in Calpurnia, it was after I found out that she'd done drag at Nashville's late lamented Connection, among other clubs, that I began to think about it in a new light. I'd always viewed drag queens as somewhat unseemly. I remember an episode of the old NBC TV program Wings, in which two of the main characters found themselves in a New York drag club having zany hijinks with the mistress of ceremonies, Eva Destruction, who's played by Alexis Arquette. I thought, boy, those queens are strange. I read Calpurnia's autobiography in the winter of 2006, and she made drag seem cool and fun. So I resolved to try it. I was living and working in Calgary, Alberta at the time, so I looked around for places to try drag out. The only game in town that I could find was a place called Twisted Element, so I checked it out, especially their Sunday night drag show hosted by the illimitable Neatron Sanoir. Being hit on by other patrons certainly made things difficult, but I managed to learn enough and be confident enough to give things a try when the next amateur night rolled around. Sadly, that was not to be. The cost of living became too high, and when combined with some issues in my personal life, I had to move out of Calgary. It transpired that the place nearest to my post-Calgary residence where I could do drag was the lilac city of eastern Washington, Spokane. Many of you might have heard of their illustrious university, Gonzaga University, powerhouse in American basketball at this time. Well, that's the place. At the now closed Dempsey's Brass Rail nightclub. I thought about it and realized I was not going to be good at drag right away. Heck, there's probably who don't think I'm very good at it today. But the only way to get good at drag was to do it. You learn by doing. Practice, practice, practice. I needed a way to get that practice in, to get stage time and not be booed off stage, or much less laughed off stage. Plenty of drag shows have auditions, which mean you need to have some ability to actually get on stage in the first place. Back in 1997, I'd read a book called Miss Vera's Finishing School for Boys Who Want to Be Girls, about an academy of sorts that taught handsome, strapping men how to be feminine in appearance and action. Miss Vera's Academy was located in New York City. In that book, Veronica Vera talks about the International Imperial Court System and the annual ball which the New York chapter, the Imperial Sovereign Court of New York, holds, called the Night of 1,000 Gowns. By the way, Veronica Vera's focus is much on drag, not on trannies of various types, so anything she writes is going to be useful to a drag queen, even if only a little bit. Being the inveterate researcher and internet addict that I am, I'd already looked up the Imperial Court System online and knew that it has chapters all over North America, Canada, the USA, and Mexico, from Alaska to Florida, San Diego to Nova Scotia. And I knew that it generated monies for various charity causes using drag shows. Your talent was secondary to your willingness to give time towards fundraising for some very worthy causes. Aha, I thought. Here's a way to be allowed on stage to do drag often enough to learn how. I knew there was a chapter of the Imperial Court in Calgary, the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Chinook Arch, which is a very Masonic sounding thing to me, and had my first drag show been in Calgary, I'd have crossed its path eventually. I looked instead for a court chapter in Spokane and came up with the Imperial Sovereign Court of Spokane, the ISCS. When I started doing drag, it was at an ISCS show in January of 2008. I'd already knew about other queens who did sort of high glamour, glitter and blonde wigs, old Hollywood sort of thing. And before I'd even trod the boards once, I knew that I could never pull something like that off. I think that's the image that many people have of what a drag queen is. So performers like myself and Statia, as well as groups like the Velvet Underworld, are marks against that kind of thinking. There are as many different ways to do drag as there are drag queens, and even the performers who do that high glamour, glitter and rhinestones, old Hollywood thing are each one a little different from the others. Not only is the blonde bombshell look not me, I listened to Iron Maiden and Tiger Army, not Whitney Houston and Celine Dion, but I knew that I couldn't measure up to other queens who did that sort of look. If I tried to look like Savannah Sorrell or Crystal Marché, two queens from Spokane, I'd have looked like a fool. I knew that if I tried and failed enough, I'd get discouraged. So within 6 months of my drag career starting, I began to pull influences in from my own likes and tastes to craft a performing style. Things like the Gothic Encyclopedia and the Goth Bible, Alice Cooper and Tony Iommi, rock and roll frontmen and stand-up comedians, FX techniques from Tom Savini and makeup techniques from Dita Von Teese, punk rock and heavy metal, it all went in the blender and continues falling in there to this day. I don't look to other drag queens as inspiration as much as I look to people like Calpurnia Adams and Freddie Mercury, because there can be only one. If Bruce Dickinson can make the guy on the other side of the soccer stadium where he and Iron Maiden are performing feel like he's right there in the mosh pit, then I can certainly make the punter on the other side of the nightclub feel like he's on stage with me. Things got dark and very, very gothic. It certainly didn't hurt that the biggest influence on my life, in regards to gender issues at least, was Calpurnia Adams, who did a whole gothic burlesque thing when she did drag. I think that precisely calibrated performances by people only interested in making money and doing everything they can to make money, they craft their look to be what they consider to be attractive. Well, for me, that's goth. I think the likes of Emily Autumn, Razor Candy, and Adora Batbrat are just drop-dead gorgeous, and I decided in those long-lost days that I wanted to be attractive in the same way that they are. Only time will tell if I've actually accomplished it. Then, as I crafted my own individual style, I looked to other aspects of the performer's craft as well. Within those 6 months of my drag career starting, I had heard so much pop music or dance music or so many novelty songs that I was ready to vomit. My vagina is 8 miles wide. God, storm loud. Must be a lot of fun on Saturday nights, eh? I'd go back to my hotel room and play AC/DC or Judas Priest so loud the walls shook just to get that schmaltzy bubblegum crap out of my head. At my vanilla job, I worked with a young lady who in years gone by was a professional singer. I asked her one day, very soon after I started performing in drag shows, how you learned a song. My coworker has the kind of singing voice that just make you cry. She's that good. I could never sing as well as she can, and I would never try. I just wanted to learn how to memorize the words, to better pantomime along to them, and to get the timing down. She told me that the best way to learn a song was to listen to it over and over and over again, so much that you actually get sick of it. This I've done more than once, by the way. So if I'm going to listen to a song so much that I almost hate it, I asked myself, do you want to perform that pop, bubblegum, dance crap, electronica novelty BS? Myself said no frickin' way. If I was going to listen to a song as much as my coworker had told me to, it was darn well going to be a song that I could actually stand listening to that much. And my reputation for doing punk or hard rock or even heavy metal music started on that day. Joan Jett, Emily Autumn, there's that name again, and Free Dominguez of the Kidney Thieves quickly took over my stereo as I sought that most righteous type of music, but with female vocals. Musically, I took things up a notch when I discovered the Iron Maidens and Thunderstruck, two all-girl tribute bands who do Iron Maiden and AC/DC songs. Everybody has heard songs like The Number of the Beast and Highway to Hell, and everybody pumps their fist in the air when those songs are played. When you hear the opening bars to You Shook Me All Night Long, you know what you're going to get, a rockin' good time. So as I've tripped merrily along, influences have piled atop influences. For those first few months I had no look or style except that I was trying to look pretty, or as pretty as an ex-rugby player over 6 feet tall can look, and I performed the rock songs, because that's what I like. Then my affection for all things gothic came through, and I made deliberate efforts to goth up my look. Black became my main color, and I sharpened my gothiness as time went by. I flirted with cybergoth for a time, and ironically nowadays, in my heavy metal phase, I can look ultimately cybergoth, much more than I could years ago, thank you, thanks to my cyber falls and a few other techniques. Goths are really into death and the undead, so I pulled that influence in as well. Around the summer of 2010, I decided that I need a performing name, or at least a better one than just my first name, and I came up with Salem. Then I started to think, Salem's a goth, so what would she be like? Remember that I'm an inveterate researcher? Well, ages ago I learned about vampires and then the various other types of undead. I thought that a vampire was an entirely acceptable type of undead because they combined the menace and seductive sexuality that many, too many, drag queens go for. Salem was quickly dubbed a vampiress. Then I thought about it more. I realized that I didn't like vampires that much. To me, a vampire is always going to be a parasite, like a tick. They're wearing a better suit. Other types of undead were about as unappealing. Zombies were both icky and fragile, and I'm not Haitian. While ghosts, spooks, and specters had none of the physicality that I sought, so they were out too. I came across a white and had deemed it good, so Salem was redubbed a white, the dead who had risen, but with a purpose. But what could that purpose of an undead drag queen be? Aside from cracking heads and having your head cracked, rugby is about the party. Nightclubs were, for me, about two things, drag shows and parties. How could I combine the two? Aha, I thought again. Salem has risen from the dead to find a decent party. For a long time, Salem was a white. She had risen from her grave to find a decent party. Graveyards must be frightfully dull, I thought. But it still wasn't right. The aspects of goth that I liked the most were its rougher, more energetic, and less languid aspects. I was drawn into industrial goths, which is the modern name for something that was called a rivethead for a long time. I read in Nancy Kirkpatrick's The Goth Bible that rivetheads had a fair amount of military aesthetic to their look. My imagination once set off madly in all directions. I went a step further and developed battlefield gothic. This is basically industrial goth, but where a hardcore rivethead or industrial goth uses industrial trappings in their look, battlefield goth uses military trappings, gas masks and military clothing styles, and the ubiquitous goth footwear Doc Martens. That's where my drag aesthetic was until quite recently when I made the twin discoveries of all-girl heavy metal tribute bands and the black metal look. Now, in boy mode, I'm a metalhead. I grew up on, still love, heavy metal groups like the Forefathers, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, Motorhead, and Judas Priest. I just love the Iron Maiden song Number of the Beast, but I could never perform to it because it doesn't have female vocals. I thought maybe I could perform to it at a turnabout show, but otherwise I was out of luck. Imagine how happy I was when I discovered an all-girl tribute band to Iron Maiden called, serendipitously, the Iron Maidens, who had covered, ta-da, Number of the Beast. That song has become my new go-to or signature number. A similar change occurred when I discovered the black metal look. Black metal is one of a few extreme variants of heavy metal music. Black metal has exaggerated the supernatural elements of heavy metal music, the occult, and satanic rumors that so condemned heavy metal in the 80s into an entire aesthetic. The lyrics to the song are soaring, operatic, and almost entirely unintelligible, while the musicianship is excellent, fast guitars and drumming like trip hammers. I don't like to listen to black metal, I like listening to the words and hot guitar licks. But if you want a hard-edged, extreme look, you can't go wrong with aping the likes of Burzum, or Leviathan, or Emperor. Bullet belts, leather badges, tight PVC pants, and black smeared-on makeup are typical. To me, the black metal look is a more aggressive and dangerous, almost exaggerated or cartoonish take on the goth look. More black, more deathliness, more silver, more occult imagery, more, to quote Wasp's Blackie Lawless. Heavy metal has already given me my beloved music, all hail AC/DC, and my approach to props and stagecraft, because you can't beat a 1980s rock band like Motley Crue or Rat for what they do with pyro, for example. Now it gave me a look, and with that look, the final component of my stage name, Suicide. Where I'll go next is hard to say, but thanks to Statutory Rape, the other showgirls here on the Velvet Underworld, y'all will have a ringside seat. So as I said at the outset, hang on. Oh, and just to be helpful, and repeat them, here are some drag tips. We must all help one another out, obviously. Drag tip number 1. Listen to a song so much that you almost vomit every time you hear it. That way you'll have it memorized, and you won't be thinking about the words while you're performing on stage. Drag tip 2. Make contact with the nearest Imperial Sovereign Court chapter to where you live. If you want to learn how to do drag, volunteering your time at their fundraiser shows are an excellent way to have a captive audience while you teach yourself. Drag tip number 3. A turnabout show is where the roles are reversed. Drag queens perform as guys, while drag kings perform as girls. Basically, you perform as your chromosomal gender. Now imagine the fun that I have as a transsexual at a turnabout show. Finally, drag tip number 4. Dita Von Teese says that every performer should have a number that you're known by, a signature number. For most of my drag career, my signature number was Taxi Cab Messiah by the Kidney Thieves. Nowadays, it's Number of the Beast by the Iron Maidens. So there you go, there is my introduction, and I hope to see you all again, Liebchens, here on the Velvet Underworld.